The number seven, according to one numerologist, is both deep and wise, not satisfied with simple explanations and surface level information. It knows the real gold is buried deeper and it won't stop till it finds it, and then it'll keep digging for more. Asking questions, researching, listening, and sensing are all special skills the seven uses in its search for awareness. Though spirituality is especially important to the number seven in numerology, it takes a more intellectual approach to life than an emotional one. It's an analytical number that enjoys gathering and filtering through information to find answers, yet it has a powerful intuition, which it uses as a guide. This combination of conscious and subconscious thinking allows the mind of numerology number seven to shine a light into the very deepest realms to access hidden truths. Or as Anne Tardos would say, it reflects an earnest desire to master language and freedom. It does that in large part with the human brain, which Anne says is soft, warm, and noisy. A book of 77 seven-line poems, all of which but one have seven words in them, is the latest offering from Anne Tardos, an American poet, author of 13 books of poetry, many of which have been translated and published in journals and anthologies around the world. The new book is The Always Already Absent Present, and Anne is our guest. Welcome.
Thank you.
Here's the new book. I wonder
Yeah.
when I talk to poets how they assemble a book. And I think that's a really good question for you. You decide to make 77 poems, you decide to have seven lines, seven words in them. Can you take us through the journey from how this was an idea to how this became a book we can hold in our hands?
The idea was the initial poem where I decided seven by seven, and it just went on from there. It felt good. It felt like something I can do, and it's these poems are a refuge for me. They show me, you know, what I'm about, what I want to be like, what my who am I? It shows me all that. So this format helped. Um, um, this format helps. I don't know. I used to do nine by nines many years ago, but it's very, very different than this series. And this series is just so helpful to me as a human being. It teaches me what it's like to be a human being.
So this is not just coming from what you think. This you're tapping in to some kind of source outside of yourself that is informing you, or it's a process by which you're finding discovery.
Yes, yes, it's outside and inside. It's a kind of a merging of the many years I have lived and the present and the many things I have seen and heard, and all that is at my disposition. She's a very rich situation. I'm like a rich man spending, spending, giving out monies, so to speak.
Spending the hard cash of your long life.
Yeah. You could say that. You could say that. Yeah. I've had a reader say that her life, she felt she was changed after she read that. It changed her.
I believe it. I'd like to start with the title. The always already absent present
Mhm.
alludes to ideas by Jacques Derrida and
Yeah.
Gayatri Chakravorty Spivak. So,
Yes.
so there's some
Yes.
heady stuff in here. What does this mean exactly? Or how do you define it?
Well, I'm not a Derridian scholar, so I find it not so easy to explain. It's just that line in Spivak's introduction to grammatology was struck me as remarkable. and I was going to use it as a uh, epigraph. And then somebody said, no, it should be the title. So good. Because it says so much about what we all think that the absence of, we always want the present, that it's always gone before we can grasp it, which is not such a bad thing, but it's a phenomenon that uh, it's good to be aware of. That nothing is static. That's what it really means.
I know one teacher in the Tibetan Bun tradition who says that we all live in the past, and it's very rare that we're actually present here in the present moment. And of course, if you look at Zen studies and Japanese culture in general, there's a character called the yurei, which is a ghost, often depicted with black hair being pulled back because this person is wounded by the past and essentially living there, and hands outreached like out towards the front because the person is afraid of what the future might bring, and always depicted with no feet, so no grounding here in the present moment. And of course, Zen teaches that the present is all we have. So I find resonances outside of the references that inspired you.
Well, Seneca said that we suffer so much more in our imagination than in reality. It's all in our heads. So much is in our heads. And we try to do our best. I
The
don't know
past,
about the
the past
past
is no longer my business, you write in one of the poems.
exactly. None of my business. It's all behind me.
That's easier said than done, though.
Well, but you have to recognize it as a reality.
Yeah. Tell us about the fascination behind the number seven.
There's no fascination. I don't know much about math, what kind of number it is. Uh, or I would say it's just a happenstance. I came upon this combination. It worked for me on some organic level, and I like adapting to it. So the whole this series of poems uh is about training my thought into that format, like you train a horse. Um,
You get into a kind of a rhythm after a while, I imagine.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, of course, inevitably.
yeah.
Even though, since I'm counting words, the lines are all different lengths.
Right. Yeah, that's interesting because it's not seven syllables, it's not seven beats, it's seven words. And there's a poem late in the book that goes two lines. Extraordinary claims require extraordinarily rigorous empirical validation. The ending line of number 72. It'd be nice to hear you read some of the poems. I'm wondering on page 21 if you could read number five.
Oh, the fly. This is about a fly we had in the house. The fly, a visitor who cleans house, sleeps on the helpless patient's nose tip. What does a sleeping fly look like? They cannot close their eyes, no eyelids. They enter torpor, but will readily awaken. Sustain periods of complete immobility, lasting hours, hesitant to respond to the external world, which contradicts the line two lines above. They enter torpor but will readily awaken. And then I say hesitant to respond to the external. It's a kind of contradiction.
The response may be when the fly swatter comes near.
Yeah.
That's fascinating. Um, in many of these poems, and I've read that your process involves research. You'll be researching a subject. This information will begin to gel, and out comes something like this. Were you reading some kind of fly articles, or it was this just this particular
I did
48
look
hour?
up. I did look up how they sleep because I know they're not always around. They appear suddenly. Hey, what's for breakfast? They show up, and but then they disappear for hours for the night. So I figured they sleep. I did look that up. Yeah. How do they sleep? What does a sleeping fly look like?
I don't think we want to know what they had for breakfast.
They want to know what we have for breakfast. They want to be invited to partake.
Yeah, I guess that's one way of looking at it. Um, there's another subject which, I'd love to get your take on, and I think it's better if you read the poem number 7 on page 23, just a couple of pages later. And the poem, I think the subject will come up as you read that, and you'll know, oh, that's where he's going with that.
The seven dwarfs
Yes.
in an ice cold environment. Fairy tales that cannot materialize outside gullible minds. Password cracker contest keeping one's mind open. AI chatbots don't know what isn't. They find nuanced requests hard to understand. They struggle with the concept of negation. They are still shrouded in their infancy.
Here we are at the beginning of the AI age. It seems like we have no idea what's coming, do we?
Well, what's coming is what we feed into them. They'll never come up with anything. I don't think they will ever, no matter how sophisticated they'll never appreciate art.
It's interesting you say that, and yet I had a friend who read a poem generated by AI. I forget what the line was, but I thought that's a pretty good line. So, and then I read that Rattle magazine suggested that they're going to have to see some evidence of pre-AI publication so they can distinguish poems that were written by a human being and poems that were written by artificial intelligence.
Yeah,
But that leads the question, what can a poet do that a machine can't? What separates human poetry from AI poetry, where you could do something sophisticated, like give me 10 sonnets in the style of Ted Berrigan that are related to Seattle?
yeah, yeah. No, you can ask it to do that because it's been fed in. If you ask it to write a few of my sevens, it won't be able to because it doesn't invent things. It doesn't think up interesting thoughts. It just it's a robot that says what you programmed it to do. It is impressive to us what they come up with, but it's not that they even understand a word of it. They don't get it. They don't know what they're composing when they compose a poem. They don't understand it. They just know what's asked of them. And it's like a parrot. The parrots talk, and yeah, I mean, if you say, they say, "How are you?" and then if you reply, "I'm fine, thank you," they don't understand that at all.
Nor can they feel the experience after they've written such a poem of being a little high.
Hmm.
having
Hmm.
a little lightness or endorphin rush or some kind of boost. Do you get that from the sevens, from a good seven?
Yeah, but not from the AI.
No, obviously not. No, I think we've determined that both you and I are not big fans of artificial intelligence, and this is a very clear articulation of that. Well, somewhat clear. The last part, they're still shrouded in their infancy.
Hmm.
That makes me a little nervous, to be honest with you. If this is what we have now, anyone's experience by picking up a telephone and trying to talk to a human and having to press eight or the voice command, just make you crazy. I wonder if they listen to these things because they say we're being recorded. Do they listen to them and hear the increasing level and frustration of people trying to do that?
Hmm.
I don't
Hmm.
know. They ought to. They ought to.
Yeah, yeah.
There's a poem on page 25, number 9, which has a notion of chaos, which I think this time right now qualifies for as we discuss your work on the morning of new tariffs going out against
Yeah,
Canada and
yeah.
China and Mexico.
That's the first step in total isolationism. Page 25, poem number 9.
Yes.
A stroke of solitary genius, a smoke, a stimulating simulation in a grocery store. Fruits on a sloped display will collapse if more than 10% is removed. Invariably surprising and hilarious event to witness. A sudden sense of chaos sets in, the kind that brings us all together.
Yeah. That was a line that I was after because we are going through a chaos with
Yes,
Elon
yes.
Musk going with a chainsaw through the federal government and civil service people being fired by 19 generals being fired by 19 years old, people in charge of the nuclear stock being fired by 19 years old. But
Well, they
you,
tried to walk that one back, but
yeah,
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 most people didn't return. They
right.
said, fuck you.
Which is probably the best response. But you end with the kind that brings us all together.
Yeah, that moved me. And you have to be, as a human being, you have to be moved. You have to move yourself when I write. If I don't move myself, if I don't find any like this ending that made it all worthwhile. Because otherwise it's a description of, I was reading about these displays on an angle, and if you remove more than 10%, it all comes tumbling down, which is hilarious in itself. But it needed the humanity.
Some emotion in it, some emotional content.
Yes, yes. That's basically what I'm after for my own benefit.
Yeah. A lot of poetry today, well, a lot of poetry forever seems disembodied intellectualism. That emotion is something to be reviled. I mean, I can understand fake emotion. I can understand, uh, you know, you know, abstractions, generalizations, and this kind of sentimentality. James Baldwin was very clear about that. I can understand the need to be opposed to that, but genuine emotion in a poem, um, you feel it. Obviously, it's necessary.
Yeah, I mean, I've discovered a certain tenderness I have for humanity and myself and my friends late in life. But so that's a wonderful discovery.
Page 35, number 19 is a poem with surreal elements. I would love to hear that in your voice. Page 35.
Oh yeah, I like stuff like that. 19 dwarf planets in our asteroid belt. Ceres, the ice dwarf with 213 Fahrenheit, you would need to seriously bundle up. Schadenfreude, Shindig, avocado, legalese, swimming pool, bully. Lisbonard, overtone, silky kangaroos, honest thought process, effervescent neophyte, little darling apricot, it's all right, searching for a way out, an exit. So
Searching for an exit from the poem, are you at that moment?
we all do, all the time. How can I get out of this present?
What inspires surreal moments like that in one of your poems?
Well, it's a I used to do that a lot more than now. It's musical entertainment.
Schadenfreude, Shindig, avocado legalese, swimming pool bully. It just goes by. It's, it's like, where does that come from? Such a moment of surprise, and you just pull it out of the ether, I guess. Um, is surrealism helpful in an age where if we want to see something surreal, we can just look at a newspaper?
It's not surreal. It's all too real, terrifying.
Yeah, can be, can be. The poem on the very next page, poem number 20, page 36, also has a line that I find very potent
Yeah,
and also related to a couple of things that we've talked about. If you could read that, that'd be awesome.
the actor breaks into a crazy laughter every time a certain line comes up. Can't keep a straight face. Only how? There are dingoes who are very sweet. They're the canine undesirables of the outback. Their visible ribs suggest life of hunger. I have to find myself every day. I just saw an Australian movie with a very sweet dingo who helps a little boy. And then it's after he's done helping, he goes back to his tribe, the other dingoes. And that was very touching, a really sweet dingo taking care of a human. And I did see the visible ribs. It struck me. I have to find myself every day. It's completely separate from what precedes, but that's a um, that's something AI would never come up with. What, you're talking about dingoes and hunger and suddenly you're finding yourself? What? I don't see AI ever writing anything resembling this, but show me something.
How does poetry help you find yourself?
That's how, by writing it. How does poetry help me find myself?
Yeah.
Yes, by letting me write it. Say,
Did you
allowing to write it. Yeah.
did you write 77 poems or did you write 85 and throw seven out or
No, no,
seven
no.
or eight
I,
out?
I stopped at 77 and 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 now I'm writing part two or book two, same format, and I'm at I'm up to 26.
And you
So
stop at 77. That's the limit.
maybe I haven't decided, but
I see.
yeah. See, I'm as an artist, you're free. You're free to do anything you damn well want. And to take advantage of that freedom is where it's at.
Yeah. Another line in one of the poems that poems teach you how to be human.
Hmm. Yeah, that's a line from a poem. No, it's something I said.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
it's
yeah, yeah.
poems. I don't have the, well, I probably do have the note. Poems teach you to be human. I would have to go back and see my notes, which are written kind of in a sloppy handwriting because I'm reading this on the bus or something like that. Yeah, number 22, um, page 38. Yeah, it's on the next page. Maybe you could read that one.
A poem that asks to be written. This was because I left out 22 by mistake. I went from 21 to 23. And then much later, I realized my error. And I thought, I have to write a 22. And that's usually not how I start it. But that's why it says a poem that asks to be written, lurking under someone's bed inside their unconscious. Endless, tantalizing ideas vibrating, merging originally. I don't remember writing this. They teach how to be human. There it is. How to keep within certain predetermined limits. My armature is my understanding, my experience. It will hold up the wet clay. I don't remember the third line. Sometimes these things escape me, you know. I don't know why.
Do you have a do you have an anecdote that illustrates how poems teach you how to be a human?
Um, well, this is what we've been talking about. What it did for me to write these things. It teaches me to be a human. Yeah, that there is a chaos, but it brings us all together. So that's a human touch. I would have just in the past I would have just laughed at it or made a joke out of it. But it brings us all together. Suddenly it's very serious and important, very important that we be together.
Do these things seem to have more gravitas as you get older and as you approach the end of your life?
Well, I would imagine that's with everybody. It's conscious, active. Sure, I'm glad to be getting older because it gives me now I have the time to perfect things, to develop things. You can't perfect it, but to the time you're given to work on things. Blessing. Very grateful.
Yeah, maybe hard to perfect picking things up at an older age, picking things up off the floor. I struggle with that myself. Um, Page 58, poem number 42 discusses consciousness. Page 58.
A fidgeting flibberty-gibbet walks up to me and asks for directions. I give them. One place is as good as another, I explain, trying to ease their anxiety. A subtle uncoupling of mind and matter. Consciousness knows itself by itself, through itself, without the need of a human mind. Now, this is a relatively new discovery that it's external. Consciousness is external originally, that we internalize it somehow, but it is not dependent on the self.
A recent discovery in Western culture, Western science, but something that indigenous people have been saying for a long time, I would suspect.
That consciousness is outside the self.
Or that everything has consciousness and it's not limited to. this part of the human body in the brain. In fact, consciousness science can't even, it just takes a guess that it's in the brain as opposed to the elbow or the spleen, I guess. They have no theory of, there's no Western scientific theory of consciousness. So discussions of consciousness are fascinating. And that it happens without the need of a human mind, I think that people will find very frightened. A lot of people would find frightened, would be frightened by that.
I'd be frightened by the idea that it's not self uh, uh, there is a new, I'm sorry, I didn't finish that sentence, but there's a new discovery, like the last few days, Western scientific discovery, that there is another stage to after death, a third stage. The first is you're alive, the second is you're not alive. But the third is that a certain amount of consciousness remains after death. And they're in our cells. As it just came up 2 or 3 days ago. I like that. I like
Seems
that.
consistent with Rupert Sheldrake and his notion of morphogenetic fields, I
Mm,
think.
yeah.
How the walls have memory.
Mhm.
Place has memory. Yeah. And I think that's what
Yeah, yeah.
indigenous people have been saying for a while. You mentioned consciousness in both number 58 and 59. Maybe reading those two poems together, pages 74 and 75.
Consciousness may have been what made evolution and life possible in the first place. That's one speculation I like. Consciousness is a fundamental feature of reality. It's a formless awareness where experiences happen. This is the latest theory regarding consciousness, that consciousness does not require a self. This news is both fascinating and unsettling. Well, I mean, that could be, what they call the soul. Some cultures call consciousness the soul. And here is this is my favorite. Maybe consciousness was installed by alien visitors who are said to have been among us, invisible or disguised as humans or animals. I would welcome such seemingly apparent benevolence. Take the wombat, so helpful and gentle, or a helpful and kind human being. I have sometimes met some of those.
Especially if you count dingoes.
Yeah.
Yeah. You mentioned the word soul, and I know that in some circles that concept is frowned on or uh, disregarded or seen as passé or seen as not helpful.
Well, it's a mystery. It's a Christian concept, and we all tackle it best way we can. This the scientific approach to consciousness or the Christian approach to consciousness. The soul flutters around outside of himself, outside of the body. And that's a huge discovery, even in the Western science, that it's not part of us, not native with us. We're just, there are different levels of consciousness, like the fish, the cat, the dog, the monkey. They all are conscious in some way, but some are more understood, better understood than others.
I think we have time for one last poem. Page
Okay.
86, poem number 70. You write about the desire you have as a poet. I think that might be a good poem to end with.
Page 86, number 70. What about the universal structure of experience, the condition of an experience in general, the history of one's lives, one's subjectivities, arduous efforts to meet daily survival techniques, earnest desire to master language and freedom, repeated interaction with people from different cultures, comfortably building tenacity, resilience, and character. So, the history of one's lives, one's subjectivities, that line begins by autobiographical section. Universal structure, experience, condition of an experience in general is more of a philosophical question. But the history of my life, my subjectivities, my efforts to meet daily, our efforts to meet daily survival techniques, the earnest desire to master language. That was, I don't know if you know my background, but I didn't grow up Anglophone at all. Grew up Francophone, but that's a long story.
Of Hungarian heritage
Hungarian.
in France.
Yeah, I mean, it's Austrian heritage in France, both Hungarian and Austrian. And my parents were either Hungarian or Austrian, both. And I remained French in their eyes, or in practical terms. I didn't speak any of their languages except French, but the French of a small child, 6 years old, which is hugely interesting. I don't know if it's interesting for this interview, but the fact that I began with French, a child's French, and learned German in between, Hungarian and German, but German in particular, French and German led me to English. And English is made up largely of French and German. Um, I learned better French, speaking English, reading English. It helped me with my French. It's very strange. I don't know what to make of it. But
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
I read
Mhm.
that line as a reason for writing poetry, earnest desire to master language and
That's
freedom.
right. That's right.
Tell us
That's right.
how it has done that for you. Poetry, being a poet. Tell us about well, I mean, you've mentioned this before in this interview, this notion of you could do 77 sevens, or maybe you got 107, or
Hmm.
300, whatever. It's up to
Yeah.
you to decide on that.
Yeah.
But at this stage in your career and your life, having written so much, how would you be able to communicate that experience of freedom through your poetry practice to someone, say, getting a graduate degree, so 25-year-old or something like that?
I mean, it's a question of I would tell the graduate student to allow themselves to use their imagination. And of course, there's a format for a sonnet, and in this case, whatever it is, sevens. But there is, we all do things during the day that we feel we ought to. We should. We're that's the what is it? Super ego? I don't know. But we constantly want to accomplish the proper what's expected of us in a way. and since childhood. And I think that you can break free from that. So I do what I want. As long as you do it interestingly and well, you do what you want. You want to write 100 poems or five, it's up to you. There is a freedom there that people don't, or that me too, haven't availed ourselves of enough. But it has to be, disciplined. You have to be disciplined. You can't just go off into the ether and say, I'm freely saying what the fuck I want. But you know, you
Whatever
gotta,
kangaroo or dingo thing comes up, I'm going to put it in the poem.
there you go. I mean, kangaroo is a beautiful word, musically. And dingo too. I love the sound of those names. And of course, I always, when I count words, I always said that a kangaroo has as much value as uh, the letter I. It's the same when I count words. Kangaroo is one and I is another. So, but I like kangaroo. I like the sound of it. I like the sound of dingo. I have it's a musical tendency when writing.
I'm so grateful to have this kind of conversation with you, Ann. I mean, it's really a gift to have you agree to do the interview, be able to go through your new book and just see what you say about the few poems I picked out. It's a really beautiful experience, and I thank you for it. And I wish you continued success with your sevens and all else that you're pulling off as you attempt to survive these chaotic times.
Yeah, thank you
Stay well.
to you too.